But before that, let's remember what today is. Yom HaShoah. Anybody know what that means?
And it's related to the Holocaust, right?
That's right. It's the Holocaust Memorial Day. That's correct. As we remember 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust by the order of Hitler and the Nazis. And we remember the fact that many Jews lost their lives, lost family members in that terrible genocide attempt by the Nazis. You see the picture on the right is the official picture for 2026 Yom HaShoah Day, Day of Remembrance. So that is from Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum. So back in the fall, we had a Holocaust memorial event here at Calvary, and Chris came and her Jewish friend came, and we unrolled the scroll, the Torah scroll that we have here at Calvary, and Yad Vashem had these pictures from the Holocaust that people could come and can look at. So the image in Yoav Kahana's 2026 poster depicts the absence within the presence. I thought that was interesting. The personal and collective rupture to the Jewish people affected by the Holocaust. The rupture accompanied the survivors as they searched for living relatives and were met with an aching void. So there again, you have the picture, wanting to hug a loved one, but not able to do it. Why? Because of the Holocaust, that terrible event. And sad to say, as you know, the slogan was never again, but never again is happening again. It really did start in October of 2023 when the terrorists attacked Israel from Gaza, and over 1,000 Israelis were killed. There were some Americans were killed also on that day. And, you know, Israel had relative peace for about 50 years. I've been reading some books on Israel and the history of Israel. And Israel had relative peace for 50 years, really, from the Yom Kippur War, which was in October of 1973, until October of 2023. 50 years, relative peace, broken. And so now, from that point on, there's been endless wars. I think a prelude for what Jesus said in Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars. And if you follow what's going on in the Middle East and what's happening with the war with Iran, United States and Israel fighting Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz being an issue right now, and sort of interesting just what's going on, wondering if this war will ever end. Well, it could be a prelude to a couple events that I believe prophetically are significant. One is the invasion of Israel in Ezekiel 38. And when you look at the alliance between Russia and Iran, which again is mentioned there, the king of the north, and it mentions Persia. We'll be talking about Persia tonight, especially as it relates to the book of Esther. Isn't that significant? Because of Haman is how I still say it, but I know when we went to the synagogue, they say Haman, right, Chris? But I still call him Haman. That's why I just was raised that way. But you know, his genocidal plot to kill the Jews was again thwarted by Queen Esther and Mordecai. So we'll look at that here tonight as well. So I think it's significant that we'd be looking at that book tonight. Yes, Chris.
I was just going to tell the fellow students, whenever professor says Haman or Haman, we're all supposed to go, boo.
That's right. Thank you. Oh, I wanted to say on today in Israel, if you did not know, they have a time where they actually stop traffic. Everybody gets out of their cars, and they put their head down for a period of time where they, again, reflect on the Holocaust. So that actually is an event that happens in Israel on this day. So we're looking at the Megilloth tonight, the scrolls. And we have these 5 scrolls, and we've been trying to see the significance of the Ketuvim, the writing section of the Hebrew Bible. And it's sort of interesting. We have these books. If you have your Hebrew Bible, you see that they are grouped together. And you probably, you did your paper. I haven't had a chance to read that on Kostenberger and biblical theology, and Greg's discussion in terms of the location of these books. But when you look at the Jewish calendar and you look at these books that are read in the synagogue, I think I mentioned this in our first week, there is a link between these books and the various feasts and fasts of Israel. We start with the Song of Songs tonight, Shir HaShirim, read on Pesach, Passover, specifically for the Jews celebrating God's love for Israel, but we'll have to talk about that. Is that the allegorical meaning of the book? And again, it's sort of a disputed book. You talk about books included in the Old Testament canon that were disputed. I think this is one of the books that was disputed. Ruth, read on Shavuot, Pentecost. The Jews celebrate Yahweh, the Lord, giving the Torah to Israel at Mount Sinai. For us, Pentecost, as the church, we celebrate the coming of the Holy Spirit, the birthday of the church, Acts chapter 2. So it's sort of interesting that Israel is linked to the Torah, which they believe was given there, Mount Sinai, Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments. But going beyond that to the whole Torah, as you think about that, the instructions regarding the building of the tabernacle, and even the instructions regarding the various festivals of Israel, given to Moses during those 40 days when he was on Mount Sinai. And then we have Lamentations, read on Tisha B'Av, usually in August of the month, mourning the destruction of the temple. Maybe I should say temples, because actually on the same day, interestingly enough, the destruction of Solomon's temple, 586 BC by the Babylonians, and then AD 70, Titus and the Romans destroyed the second temple. So the Jews have been without a temple on the Temple Mount since AD 70. Desire to see a third temple built. We believe as dispensationalists that there will be 2 more temples on the Temple Mount. Revelation 11 talks about that temple, sometimes called the Tribulation Temple, because by the middle of the tribulation period, there will be offering and sacrifice, and the Antichrist is going to go into that rebuilt temple, and we have the setting up of the abomination of desolation, the idol image of the Antichrist by the false prophet, the Antichrist declaring himself to be God. So I did a message for our Bible prophecy conference on the 70 weeks prophecy, and talk more about this next week when we look into Daniel, but you can watch that that link to that message, and I deal especially with Daniel 9:27. And then we have Ecclesiastes or Kohelet read on Sukkot, the tabernacles or booths, Feast of Booths, again reflecting on the meaning of life. Solomon searched for the meaning of life. And then we have Esther, the scroll of Esther. When Chris and I were at the synagogue, local synagogue here in the Kansas City area, we got to hear the reading of the book of Esther on Purim. Again, remembering how God sovereignly, providentially protected the Jews from Haman, not Ham, but Haman there. And his evil genocidal plan to kill all the Jews. Well, let's start by talking about the Song of Songs. Some internal evidence for Solomon as the author. Looking at some of those verses, it mentions Solomon by name. So if you have your Bible, you can turn back there. In our English Bible, of course, you have the Song of Solomon. Right before we start the major prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah. So it actually has the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. And my Bible has a cross-reference back to 1 Kings. We talked a little bit about Solomon and wisdom when we looked at the book of Proverbs. So Solomon was the third king of united Israel, Saul, David, and Solomon. And it mentions in chapter 4, verse 32 of 1 Kings, he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. 1,005 songs. He's songwriter. My wife and I have been reading a book in our times when we go out on dates. It's a book about the background historical story behind various hymns, talking about different people who wrote hymns. And that's a fascinating subject. We're going to try to decipher, I think is a good word, Song of Songs tonight. How do we understand, how do we interpret this book that is much debated and discussed? So you've got the curtains of Solomon mentioned there. Chapter 1, verse 5, his couch, verse 7. And that right, verse 7. That's the right one. Oh, seems like I got some wrong references here. Just mention chapter 3, verse 11, King Solomon with the crown that his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding. So I think that's sort of interesting because the question is often asked about the identity of the various ones here. You have the Shulamite woman, and you have the beloved. He mentions the beloved, the daughters of Jerusalem. So with poetic literature, any type of mention of historical person like King Solomon here, it actually mentions a crown and it mentions the day of his wedding, may give us a clue in terms of historical setting for this book. Get your views on this here in a minute. Let me go through a few more things. And so Solomon had a vineyard in Baal Haman. So we're recognizing Baal there, but this was in the hill country of Ephraim, about 50 miles north of Jerusalem. So several references to Solomon. That's a historical person. Third King talks about King Solomon there. So I think we need to at least consider that Solomon, if he is the author of this book, is referencing an event in his life. And we know that Solomon is a lover of nature. That's chapter 4, verse 33, back in 1 Kings. I got it here. It says, he spoke of trees, the cedar tree of Lebanon, the hyssop that springs out of the wall. He spoke of animals, birds, creeping things, fish. Remember we talked about that when we were looking at Proverbs and some of the different animals. And then if Solomon wrote Job, which there's a real possibility because of that Job 28 text that talks about wisdom. And we know that Solomon was next to Christ, the wisest man. It could be his knowledge of nature is seen there. Of course, the Lord is the one asking the questions of Job, but to know all those facts about the various animals, facts about weather, it just seems that whoever wrote Job had to know something about nature. Well, some people say, well, how could Solomon be the author? I mean, if this book is about marriage, about love, how could Solomon be the author of this book? He wasn't necessarily the example of a faithful husband. We're told he had 700 wives, 300 concubines. So how in the world can Solomon write this book, which seems to be a book about marriage and love? Well, one possible answer to that would be if the one referred to as the beloved one could be a reference to his first wife. And if that is the case, then Song of Songs would have been the first of the books that Solomon wrote after his first marriage, before he married the foreign wives that turned his heart against the Lord. And it seemed like everybody went away. Okay, looks like everybody's frozen or I'm frozen. Let's see. Chris, you still here with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're just breaking up a bit. Your connection seems to be slow. In fact, I can see under your name, next to your name, that you only have one signal, Professor.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. Is everybody back now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Never fails. They always do updates and changes on Tuesday nights. Well, Solomon reigned as king from 970 to 930. So I was saying before it could be that he wrote this book early on. We're going to talk about Ecclesiastes, probably written last. So you had Song of Solomon, then Proverbs, than Ecclesiastes. Question is, did he write Job or not? Well, look at all the different possible interpretations of the Song of Songs. Now, we just mentioned that for Jewish people, they see this as sort of a love story, Yahweh, God, and Israel. So that would be specifically allegory. The fact that the book is read during Passover would seem to indicate that. And then for many years, this was viewed as the relationship of Christ and his church, the bride of Christ. Again, more of an allegorical approach. And then others would say, well, this is a married couple that serve as a type of Christ and his church. You do have this drama, Solomon and the Shulamite woman. Or are there three people, the Shulamite, a young man, and Solomon? Again, some debate on that. Others say it's just a collection of love songs. And the groom plays the king, and the bride plays the queen. But it's just sort of love songs that people sing like today. Others go so far as to say, well, this is a pagan fertility cult liturgy. And then others say it's just an anthology of disconnected love songs. We got all different interpretations. I've got all kinds of articles there in your Canvas course there under modules. You can save those in a file, read them sometime if you haven't had a chance. So there is a dispute in the Mishnah, Tractate Yadihim, as to whether the Song of Songs should be included in the Old Testament canon. Again, disputed book. Rabbi Akiva, God forbid that anyone should say the Song of Songs renders one's hand impure. The greatest day was the one in which Israel received the Song of Songs. All of the writings in the Bible are holy, but the Song of Songs is the holy of holies. So Rabbi Akiva was for including the song in the canon. Well, again, many church leaders look at Jerome, Athanasius, Augustine, saw this as an allegory of Christ's relationship to his church. Well, we go back to Genesis 2:24. The first marriage, Adam and Eve. God defines marriage. A man will leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. As we study Proverbs, we saw the importance of marriage and the godly Christian wife there in Proverbs 31. Marriage is a covenant relationship described there in Malachi, the wife of your covenant, between one man and one woman that involves a public commitment, that's leaving and cleaving, and then a private sexual union becoming one flesh. And we know that that text, interesting, is repeated 2 times in the New Testament. Matthew 19, when Jesus was interacting with the Pharisees about whether there's any grounds for divorce or not. And then in Ephesians chapter 5, he talks there about how marriage should be a picture of Christ's relationship to the church. Now, 2 key purposes for the book. This statement about waiting for love. Some have said that that statement in the song is an encouragement to young people to wait until marriage to enjoy the pleasures of sex. And secondly, to encourage married couples to enjoy their physical sexual union. I mean, in the history of the church, as you know, there are some who believe that the original sin was sex, which again was wrong. And again, looking at sex in a very negative way. but when I teach Genesis, I always like to emphasize, sex is God's idea. He created man, male and female, and it's his gift to a man and his wife. Well, this is a lyric poem. I believe it tells Solomon's love story. We mentioned King Solomon, his wedding, or his wedding there in that text. Some see the first chapters here as a focus on the courtship, Solomon and the Shulamite, the wedding night specifically described, the maturing of his marriage, and then finishing up talking about love once again. Now, some say there's a problem with this view because they say it seems like there are verses in the first few chapters that the couple had sex before the wedding night. And of course, that would go against our view of sexual purity. Like in chapter 1, verse 2, starting off, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. Or chapter 1, verse 4, the king has brought me into his chambers. Or chapter 3, verse 4, until I had brought him to the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who conceived me. Some have said that doesn't seem to be quite right in terms of a courtship where you have purity before marriage. Now, you worked on your analysis of Dorsey, and he sees here a chiasm, and you'd say, well, of course, that's how he sort of interprets the Old Testament. And the question is, are all the chiasms valid or not? And that's where hopefully you're doing some analysis here, not just saying everything is true. But he sees some parallels, chapter 1, verse 2 to chapter 2, verse 7, and then chapter 8, verses 5 through 14, closing words dealing with mutual love and desire. Chapter 2, 8 through 17, the young man's invitation to the young woman to join him in the country. And then in chapter 7, we have the young woman's invitation to the young man to join her in the country. So that's sort of interesting. And then you have the young woman's nighttime search for the young man, chapter 3, 1 through 5. That's sort of interesting. And how does that all play into what we see as the wedding day in the middle? Then you have the parallel, chapter 5, 2 to 7, 11, the young woman's nighttime search for the young man and their speeches of admiration and longing. Okay, before I move on, I want to get I'll go back here, get your impression or questions or comments, just your thoughts on some of the things I've shared. Again, it's difficult because different people have different views. So I'll read a different view here in a minute, but I want to get your take on the song before we move on.
I think when you connect Proverbs chapter 5 with the Song of Songs, then it becomes clear that, it is a marriage relationship that is to be highly honored.
I agree with you. And again, if Solomon he did write that Proverbs 5 text, and you link that here with the Song of Songs, I think that's a good link. Yes. Anybody else? Do you think Solomon is referring to himself in the book? Is he talking about somebody else?
It does seem terribly personal. It is a tough one to be absolute about, but I've always thought it was him.
Yep. I'm going to read from Paul Tanner. I went to school at Dallas with him, and he's written several articles on the song. This is from his article, The Message of the Song of Songs. He says the literary structure of the book has highlighted the wedding day, which you see here, and the sexual consummation as the center of the book. There's a mounting excitement as it crescendos to the bliss of marital union that is enjoyed. One would think the story would end at this point, but the relationship has achieved its deepest physical fulfillment. But that is the point. The book is not just about the enjoyment of God-ordained sex and marriage. That is part of the message of the book, that two people can enter into the marriage covenant and fully enjoy their physical intimacy. But the book has a deeper plot. The literary structure directs attention to the two dream sections that form an inclusio to the wedding day, which I think Dorsey is reflecting here. These dreams reveal an insecurity and reservation about the relationship. In light of the mention of numerous queens and concubines in chapter 6, verse 9, there is little wonder. All her life, the Shulamite has kept herself a virgin for the man that she will marry. Chapter 4, verses 12 through 15. Even her brothers watch over her to ensure this. Chapter 8, verse 9. She was prepared to be a loyal and faithful wife, but Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. 1 Kings 11, verse 3. No wonder she delivers the moral lesson of the book. He is totally unqualified to speak on the issue of godly, dedicated love. He knew the physical side of it, but he did not know the love that she cherished. Once this inherent tension within the book is recognized, many of the details begin to make sense. She longs for him. She wants to have him alone without the intimidation of others in the harem of Solomon. Solomon is infatuated with her, but he's blinded from seeing the possibilities of an exclusive relationship. All right, you can see that he has a little bit different perspective in terms of the relationship of Solomon and the Shulamite, placing it again in the context of the life of Solomon. He would see this as something, a relationship that he had, a marriage that he had, in addition to other relationships. Whereas I tend to lean toward this is the first relationship, his first wife. Your thoughts on that?
I think it makes sense. What you said.
What my view?
Yeah. Oh,
my
sorry.
view
Yeah,
or
you
his-
had yours. Those Gromacki.
Okay.
The first one.
Okay.
She was the first one, I think.
Okay.
I think that verse 6:12 gives an indication that it is Solomon when she's saying her desire is set for a prince.
Okay.
And I'd agree.
6:12.
It must be early love, young love, maybe his first love.
Young love.
It feels like
first
that.
love. Yes. Okay. Anybody else want to say anything? Go ahead,
Well,
Chris.
I'm totally just thinking out loud here, but do you see any connection between the relationship between Jacob and Rachel versus Jacob and his other three wives, where Jacob absolutely loved Rachel, but the other ones, he just did what he had to do, I guess. But
Yeah. Well, I think that Paul Tanner would probably see that more in his understanding. That it was sort of, he loved her more than anybody else, but he had relationships with others. I guess it relates to the timing of everything. Okay, I need to move on. So I'm going to skip over some of this stuff and move on to the next book. I had the Shulamite's protected brothers. If she's a wall, we'll build a protection of silver. That means if she has displayed good moral character, they would show a measure of freedom for her. But if she's a door, we're going to box her in with boards of cedar. That is to restrict her freedom. Protected brothers. But the woman claims to be a wall, a woman of moral character. She does recognize she's sexually attractive, and she confesses her love for Solomon. Moving on to Ruth. Now, isn't it interesting that you have these different books focusing on women? And you got Song of Solomon, and now we have Ruth, and later on we're going to have Esther. And so we've got several books in the Old Testament that really do focus on women. So we talked about the controversy with the Song of Songs. I guess the controversy for Ruth would be what?
She was a foreigner.
Yeah, she's a foreigner, and she's going to be in the line of Messiah, a Gentile, Moabites. All right, so some have said this book is misnamed. They say it shouldn't be Ruth, it should be Naomi. What do you think?
Mara.
Mara. Bitter, right?
She renamed herself.
She renamed herself.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems
Anybody
like
else?
Ruth is the central character in Boaz. I mean, you can see like it kind of has bookends of Naomi's life, and the theme of redemption and is part of Naomi's life and story. But Ruth, to me, is the central character in this story.
Okay. Well, let's move on. We'll talk more about this as we go. So I like to, when I teach narrative literature, give the VIP treatment. The very important people. When I teach Old Testament survey, I make sure my students know who the people are. So Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, who left Bethlehem and died in Moab. Why did he leave Bethlehem?
No bread.
There's a famine.
No bread in the house of bread. There's a famine, right? Why was there a famine?
God's judgment.
Yep, go back to Deuteronomy 28, right? So they were worshiping idols, right? Baal. That led to judgment, right, during the time of the judges. So Naomi is the widow of Elimelech, whose bitterness is turned to joy. So that's the reason why I say should the book be called Naomi instead of Ruth. Ruth is a Moabitess. She chooses to go with Naomi to Bethlehem, of all places, and of course she's going to meet and marry Boaz, who's a farmer there. Mahlon is Ruth's first husband, who died in Moab. Chilion is the husband of Orpah, who dies in Moab. Don't want to go to Moab. I mean, Elimelech died there. Mahlon, Chilion, they died there. Orpah is also a Moabitess, but she doesn't choose to go with Naomi and Ruth. She chooses to go back to Moab, the gods of Moab. Boaz, the kinsman redeemer from Bethlehem, we have to talk about what is a kinsman redeemer. The unnamed relative. There's an unnamed person, the relative of Naomi, who refused to be her kinsman redeemer. Judah is mentioned, son of Jacob, from whose line the Messiah would come. Remember when you studied Genesis, you talked about the Messianic prophecies, Genesis 49:10, the Messiah, Lion of the tribe of Judah. Perez, Judah and Tamar. That story is found again in Genesis 38. They had twin sons. Perez is the younger of the two, and from his descendants would come Boaz, ultimately David and Jesus. So you see that link then from Jacob to Judah to Perez, and then ultimately to Boaz, David, and Jesus. Obed, the son of Ruth and Boaz, who will be the great grandfather of King David. And then David, the very last word in the book of Ruth is David, Israel's second king. And that genealogy is very, very important. Just as we have seen starting with Genesis 5. You'll be talking about that, hopefully, doing a little study on genealogy for the Toledot, understanding its significance in the book of Genesis as a possible essay question. But it does narrow down the line, right? From Adam, the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis 11, you have the Toledot of Shem, which takes us down to Terah, who was the father of Abraham. And so then you have the Toledot of Terah, which tells the story of Abraham. And you have, again, Toledot of Ishmael and Isaac, right? Ishmael is not the chosen line. It's going to be Isaac. And then after Isaac, it's not Esau, but it's Jacob. And then of the 12 sons of Jacob, in the blessing there in Genesis 49, it goes from Jacob to Judah. So this is a very important book because it's going to connect Genesis to David, and we think about the Davidic covenant in 2 Samuel 7, how important that is. So hopefully that helps a little bit as you think about that question on the Toledot and Genesis.
To the Gromacki.
Yes.
How about Jesse? Where is Jesse among them?
Who is that again?
Jesse.
Oh, Jesse.
Yes.
Yeah, he would be the father of David. Yeah, he would be in the line as well. Yes.
There you go. Okay.
Line of Boaz. Now, the article I've given you in your notes in the book of Ruth, Narration and Shared Themes by Eugene Merrill. He's done a lot of excellent work in the historical books of the Old Testament. And so we're talking about the historical setting of Ruth. In our English Bible, of course, it's linked with Judges. In fact, the very first verse, it came to pass in the days the judges ruled. So this is before the time of the kings, Saul, David, Solomon. So that's the reason why in our English Old Testament, we link Ruth with Judges. Also significant is this statement: in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. So again, it was a time of no kings. I guess there are a group of Americans pretty happy about that. Time of no kings, but also a time of moral relativism, also reflective of our day. No king, but everyone's doing what is right in their own eyes. and everyone is saying what they want to say about anything and everything, and everybody thinks that they know what's going on when really they don't. That's the day we live in. Days of deception for sure. Okay, so I found it very fascinating in reading the article today from Merrill to talk about the Bethlehem trilogy. Did you know there was a Bethlehem trilogy? 3 stories in a row from the end of Judges and linked to the book of Ruth. And each one is a story about a person who left Bethlehem. Of course, we know from Micah 5:2, Bethlehem, the place that God chose for the birth of Jesus. He would be born in Bethlehem. So story number 1 is from Judges 17 and 18. A young Levite from Bethlehem leaves his home to find a job. Wrong job. Priest for Micah and the worship of idols. He's going to be hired by the tribe of Dan as the tribal priest. And they're actually going to relocate this tribe to the city of Laish in the north, and they're going to establish a cult center. So a Levite, someone who should have been helping the Israelites worship the true God, Yahweh, is involved in idolatry. Story 2, a Levite of Ephraim took as his concubine a young woman from Bethlehem, but these evil men of Gibeah brutalized her. Terrible story. They brutalized this woman through the night, left her dead at the door of her house, and her Levite husband then told the elders what happened. And so they met at Bethel, Judges 20, verse 18, and it was determined that the men of Judah would lead Israel to attack Benjamin. And so they did attack. There were several setbacks. They weren't victorious at first. And so they went back to Bethel and they asked for the blessing of God this time from the high priest Phinehas. And this time when they fought the Benjamites, they nearly wiped them out. Then you have the story of how that tribe, how the men was able to get their wives, tells that story there. But again, this is in the next chapters of Judges, and that's brought out by Eugene Merrill. Now, a couple of things here about that story. It says there were only 600 Benjamite survivors. And it says that the women, the maidens that came from Shiloh and Jabesh Gilead, became the wives of the Benjamite survivors. Why is that significant? Because guess who's from the tribe of Benjamin? The first king of Israel, Saul. Saul's of the tribe of Benjamin. That's not a good sign, right? And he brings that out here in the article.
The Apostle Paul was in tribe of Benjamin.
Yeah, he thought that was a good thing because he was, but in this context, it's not.
Yep.
The city, he says, was no doubt the ancestral home of Saul. His forebears, the Benjamites, some of them came from Shiloh or Jabesh Gilead. The latter is more likely correct, and this is seen in the unusual interest Saul had in Jabesh Gilead. Soon after Saul became king, Jabesh Gilead fell under the Ammonite siege, and they would have been captured had Saul not intervened. That's in 1 Samuel 11. Remember, after Saul's death and his body was exposed on the walls of Bethshan. If you ever go to Israel, you want to go to Bethshan. It has amazing tell there. And the body of Saul, after he was killed in the battle with the Philistines, was put on the wall of Bethshan. The men of Jabesh Gilead came and took his body down and buried it in their town. That's 1 Samuel 31. And it says David later brought it for interment at Zelah in Benjamin, 2 Samuel 21. So the second Judges narrative reflects badly on Benjamin and by implication the ancestry of Saul and his dynasty. And then we have the third story, the story of Ruth, which again is in Judges, and you have a story that is really not about Ruth as much as it is the blessing of Boaz. This is pointed out by Merrill. As you get to Ruth chapter 4, let's not miss that blessing. I was thinking about that from last night, Kelso, that whole idea of blessing, which Tiago focused his dissertation on, the blessing. And you have this blessing of Boaz. Chapter 4, verse 11. Let's see. Let's go before that. Let's go up to chapter 4, verse 9. Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses today that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, all that was Kilion's, Mahlon's, from the hand of Naomi. Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance." We talk about the marriage there, right, of the near relative, right, to continue the inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren, from his position at the gate. And that was the place where business was done, was at the gate. When I did my trip to Israel back in 2023, you've heard the expression from Dan to Beersheba. Well, we went to Dan and we saw the gate of Dan. We saw the place where Abraham, possibly when he rescued Lot, he was there, sometimes referred to as Abraham's gate. Now it says here, all the people were at the gate, verse 11, and the elders, and they said, "We are witnesses." And now notice they said, "The Lord," that's Yahweh, "make the woman who is coming to your house," notice, "like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. May you prosper in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem." What a blessing this is, right? Which ultimately is fulfilled with, of course, Messiah being born in Bethlehem of Ephratah. "May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this young woman." And then you go on and see, Boaz took Ruth as his wife, and she conceived and bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord." So you have the blessing of Boaz. And now you have the blessing of the Lord by the women, who has not left you without this close relative. May his name be famous in Israel. So may his name be famous in Bethlehem, verse 11. Now verse 14, may his name be famous in Israel. And may he be to you, notice, a restorer of life, a nourisher of your old age, your daughter-in-law, who loves you, that's Ruth, who's better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. And Naomi took the child. and put him on her bosom, and she became a nurse to him. That's why I say the focus here at the end of the book is not on Ruth. It's not on her. It's on Boaz, the kinsman redeemer, and it's on Naomi. You know, it's hers, right? The child is really not hers, but she's nursing the child. And then the women said, "There's a son born to Naomi." That's why I was saying, should this book be called the Book of Ruth, or is it the Book of Naomi? I mean, you got the women at the end focusing on Naomi, even though Ruth it's her son. And they called his name Obed. He's the father of Jesse. You mentioned Jesse there, Paul. So Obed was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. And so then you have the end of the book, again, with this genealogy and the whole focus on Boaz and David. So you have the blessing of Boaz by the men. Then you have the women, they're blessing Boaz. And you don't really see Ruth as a focus here at the end of the book. All right, so in the Bethlehemite trilogy, finishing this up, the focus of the story, the genealogy of King David at the end of the book, and David being the last word of the book of Ruth. So story 3, very similar to stories 1 and 2 in the Bethlehemite trilogy. I found that to be pretty fascinating. And again, maybe an argument for our view that Ruth is best placed there next to Judges. At least it is in our Hebrew Old Testament. It's not in the Hebrew Bible, but I thought that was sort of interesting. So as you were thinking about the first book that we talked about, and you did your paper on that Song of Songs, and as you think about the placement of the book here of Ruth in the canon, some biblical theology insights from your paper that you'd like to share from one or two of those before we take a break?
Well, I guess I'll jump in. So in the Christian Bible, I've always wondered, why, Ruth, Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah, they were all on the first part before Job, Psalms, and Proverbs, but having them together in the Tanakh, it makes total sense because of the wisdom of the wisdom literature and how it was portrayed, like Ruth portrayed Proverbs 31 woman.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Anybody else with a biblical theological insight? Song or Ruth, either one from your paper.
Yes, I would also say concerning naming, Ruth acts as a linkage between the beginning and the end. Without Ruth, there would be no Obed. I think that is striking.
Mm-hmm. You can reference your paper if you like, if you have it there. Okay, I think we'll take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we'll look at the Hebrew text, Ruth 1:16 and 17. All right, so 5-minute break and we'll come back.
Dr. Gromacki.
Yes, Chris.
So we had to read Walter Kaiser's Preaching and Teaching from the Old Testament. I believe that was in
Yes.
the research methods.
Yep.
He did absolutely an excellent treatment of the Song of Solomon and the Proverbs 5 connection.
Okay.
And, you know, in the non-proverbial wisdom section, starting on page 94 through the rest of the chapter.
Mhm.
And I mean, I marked it up, I highlighted it, and it was just fantastic. It was such a blessing to read. I thought that was a great reference.
It's always great to find summaries of things to help you when you are working through a text. And of course, commentaries can help. Hopefully, some of these journal articles that I've given to you will help you as well. Probably some of the most famous verses from the book of Ruth, often quoted in weddings, are Ruth 1, 16 and 17. So I thought it'd be good for us to at least look at these verses in the Hebrew. So we'll get several of you involved here to just maybe read one line. So we've got several lines here. Someone want to read the first line? Start there.
Yes, I'll try it.
Go ahead.
Vathomer, Ruth, Al, Tifga Ave, La Az, Vek, Lashuv, May, a Say, Reka, Key.
Okay. Someone want to take the second line?
I'll do that.
I'll do
Go
it.
ahead, Ron. Go
Oh.
ahead, Ron. I'll let Ron, and then you can take the next shorter one in the beginning of the next one. Go ahead, Ron. Second
Okay.
line.
Elasher, Teleki, Elek, Vav, or Vavesh, Vavesher, Tali, Ni, Lean, Mek, Ami.
Okay. And Paul.
Okay. Ve lo ha hik elo hai.
And go on to the next line.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so okay. Baher share damuti amut ve sham ekaber ko ya asher Yahweh lei.
Okay, so just a reminder, whenever you see Yod He Vav He, they don't say Yahweh, they just say Adonai.
Adonai. Okay, I see.
Okay. All right. That's what they do in the synagogue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Gromacki, just a question. But in the exam, when we see the 4 letters, can we say Yahweh in the exam? Or in our presentation?
No, that's fine. Yeah, you could say Yahweh. I'm just saying that when they say it in when they're reading it, where they'll say Adonai, they don't say Yahweh.
Okay. So in our presentation also, I can say in Psalm 10,
Yeah, you can say
Yahweh.
you can say Yahweh. Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't care. Yeah, you can say
Good.
Yahweh. Okay,
Okay,
somebody want to read the last line?
I can try.
Okay, go ahead.
Veho Yosif ki Hamavet Yafrid Beini uvei nech.
Okay, you guys did a great job reading. I hope you can translate it. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask. I know.
Yeah, it's another challenge.
So you have, of course, the Ruth. You see that the second word there, vatomer. What would that be? Amer.
Say.
She
Speak,
said.
isn't it to speak or to say,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Ruth said, all.
Negative, not.
Okay.
True.
Now that's a more difficult. Tiff, yeah, E, B.
Oh.
Different translations have what? Don't pressure me. Don't urge me. To leave. Azavka, to leave you. To leave you. Don't pressure me. Don't urge me to leave. Azav. Okay. The next one, the lamed preposition and shuv.
To return.
To return. That's right. To return. To return, the main preposition, akarik.
After or behind.
Okay. From you. All right.
From you.
Right. From you. Why? Key is because, right? Going to give the reason. For. El Ashir.
Where you go?
Okay, where you go?
I go.
Yeah. I go. Yeah.
I go, right?
Ali, yeah.
What's the next one?
Abide.
Okay. What's the word for abide?
Well, Lou.
Okay, so where
So-
you live or where you lodge, I will lodge, okay? And then Amek Ami. You see, what is that?
Your people.
People.
Yeah, you have the your suffix there. Your people, my people. E is your people, my people, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then she adds the vav, which is the and. Then you have like Elohim, right?
Right.
Elohim and
Your
Elohe.
God.
So you got your God, my God. Your God, my God. So the way we translate it, your people will be my people and your God will be my God. Smooths out the translation a little bit there. The next line.
In which.
Sarah.
Where you
What's
die?
moot? Yeah, where, Asher, where you die.
I die.
I die. I will die. See, there's the
You.
Aleph, which relates to first singular. Where you die, I die. And there, Sham, yep. Again, the
Kaber.
kaber is the word for to bury. I will be buried. Then yeah,
Thus,
what's that?
thus, or
Okay, thus, okay. Of course, you have Adonai. What's a sa?
To
To
make.
do or make, right?
yes.
Adonai will do this to me, right? Li is again the preposition. God will do this to me. And finally, what's the last line? Bako.
I don't know what. If for death.
If
Yeah.
that parts,
B'nai,
Okay.
common singular.
Okay, you have the death there. Common singular. Okay. So how would you translate that?
You.
Okay.
I'm looking at the preposition. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, the preposition. Okay.
Yeah. Ubunek. B'nai. Me.
Between.
That
Us.
between.
Okay, between. Okay.
between you
Between
and
me
me.
and you.
Between me and you. That's right, between me and you. Okay. I wanted to read a couple more things before we move on to the next book. Here's a commentary series. I think I've mentioned this before, and I think if you've had the Hebrew exegesis class, you got the Zondervan exegetical commentary, and this one is on Ruth. So if you're looking for a really good commentary series that deals with the, this is of course the Old Testament dealing with the Hebrew text, I would recommend that. And then the same for the Zondervan exegetical commentary on the Greek New Testament. So Daniel Block is the one who wrote the Ruth commentary, and he's also the general editor for the Old Testament series. So usually keep that in mind. It's the same for my my Ephesians commentary by Clinton Arnold on Ephesians. That's the Zondervan Ephesians exegetical commentary. He's also the general editor for the whole series. So you know if the general editor is writing a commentary, that's probably going to be a pretty good commentary. I mean, because if he's been chosen to be the editor for the whole series, which I said is a very good series, then it's definitely one that you'd want to consider. So I'm just going to read what he says about verses 16 and 17. Having heard Naomi's release, her command to return to Moab for the fourth time, and watching her sister-in-law head down the road, Ruth faced a momentous decision. Would she choose the familiar, her mother's house, her own people, the Moabites, her God, Chemosh, that's Chemosh, the socially established pillars of security? Or would she choose the unfamiliar, casting her lot with her mother-in-law and her alien kinsfolk, their God, Yahweh, whom she knew only through the grid of Naomi's imperfect faith? With Ruth's declaration in 16b to 17, the first act reaches its climax. Indeed, the first words we hear from her lips are among the most memorable in all of Scripture. Few utterances match her speech for sheer poetic beauty, the extraordinary courage and spirituality it expresses. And then it talks about the structure of the text. I won't go on and read, but you can see he writes well. He writes well, and I always look for commentaries like that, where somebody writes well and explains well, helps you to think. I like to say one more thing about Ruth before I move on, and that's the goel and the importance of word studies. So I think I mentioned to you, I had Dr. Alan Ross as my Hebrew professor. And actually, I had my second Hebrew class. We had to translate Ruth and Jonah. So we had to do 2 books in that class. We had exegetical studies in Ruth and Jonah. So he gave me a word study on Goel. And I just thought I'd read some sections of this. The Goel is a term applies to a relative, some family relation who will act to redeem, protect, restore property, and the posterity of a family member. Let's talk about property. The nearest male relative of a weak or oppressed Israelite was responsible to protect the property of the family. And this person, this relative, came to be known as the kinsman redeemer, the Goel. According to the law, Leviticus 25:25-34, he was to buy back land sold by a relative. This was to ensure the family retained the full benefit of the property. During the 49 years, the property could possibly be in the hands of someone other than the owner. The Goel was to be paid the extra restitution, which was applicable to the violation of property rights. In the book of Ruth, Boaz is determined to settle the matter with regard to Ruth. He started the legal proceedings with the redemption of the portion of the field that belonged to Elimelech and thus to Mahlon. The verbs Maver and Kana are used in this discussion. In the final analysis, the near relative uses Gaal for the whole process. He says in chapter 4, verse 6, I am not able to redeem it, lest I mar my inheritance. You redeem it yourself. In addition to redeeming family property, the Goel could redeem for his own use things that he had vowed. Skip over to another section here. The kinsman redeemer of blood could assume the responsibility of a blood avenger. If someone in the family was killed, Numbers 35:24, the Goel would put the murderer to death when he met him at large. It mentions several verses. The action of the Goel was legal, whether the murder had been premeditated or accidental. Thus, the kinsman would vindicate the family name by avenging the death. Moreover, the fear of the avenger would serve to protect the life of the family member. If a man died without leaving children, a male heir primarily, it was the duty of the Goel to marry the deceased man's widow and provide an heir who would continue his name and inherit his property. Deuteronomy 25:5-10, Ruth chapter 4, verses 5 and 10. The straightforward interpretation of Ruth shows that Ge'alah incorporates the institution of the levirate marriage as well as property acquisition. The point of this part of the activity of the Goel was social immortality. The name of the family member be continued from generation to generation, so his inheritance would remain in the family. The responsibilities of the Goel was voluntary and not obligatory. The emphasis in Ruth is on the willingness to redeem, as well as the possibility of refusal, shows that a kinsman could renege on his duties, but to do so is to refuse to do hesed within the family and thereby incur disgrace. In Ruth, the near kinsman's name is expunged from the record and replaced by John Doe. This is poetic justice. So that's the reason why the person was not named. But I think that was sort of interesting, just some of the responsibilities of the Goel. And again, if you do the word study, you come across important words. It's helpful to see, how the word is used, and of course, in different contexts to describe and define what what the kinsman redeemer's responsibilities ultimately were. Well, now we come to Lamentations. I told someone tonight before we started, this is the first time in all my years of trying to teach 7 books in one day. Because I did James this morning. I spent an hour and 20 minutes on James. Everybody's frozen up. I'll have to wait a minute. Hey, everybody's back. Welcome back. So I was telling someone here at the beginning that this is the first time I've taught all these books in one day. Right? I taught James this morning, and now I've taught Song of Songs and Ruth. Now I'm going to go to Lamentations. So just as Ruth in our English Old Testament is linked to Judges, Lamentations is linked, as you know, to Jeremiah. So let's go back there. Most believe that Jeremiah is the author of Lamentations. And just as I share with you the historical context for Ruth being the time of the Judges, Lamentations is linked to the destruction of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, 586 BC. And let's get some more people involved in reading here. The very first verse of Lamentations, who has not read yet? We'll go with Britton first. Go ahead. Line 1 there, Britton.
Oh, let me see here. Ekta, yeah, Vesaba, Hadad, Hair, Rabati, Hayata.
Thank you. Andrew, you go next.
Ha'almana, Ravati, Bagoyim, Sarati, Bamdinot, Hayata.
And the last word.
Oh, sorry. Lamas.
Okay. They're doing lots of updates tonight. We're all frozen, or I'm being frozen one way or another. Okay. Let's try to decipher this one here, translate it here. What do you got here for a call?
Oh.
How? Did someone say how?
Yes.
Okay. Yasba Bada. What is that?
Obey.
Bishop,
Lonely city.
Vesaba, yes.
Here, I know that. That's the city.
To dwell.
To dwell. Okay.
Yeah.
Not sure what Badad is.
Only.
Let's see. Rabati
Full of people.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. People, that's right.
Mm.
Once filled with people, right? Let's see.
Third female. Became?
Yeah, what's Robati?
Oh, sorry.
Is that I became great?
Okay. Yeah, you actually have it's the same word as the first line, right? Isn't that the same?
That's
It has the word of great, yeah.
I think it's like I became as a widow.
Okay. Which one is the widow word?
No.
The very first word, like a widow, is that like a widow there?
Yes.
The first word?
Yes.
Okay. Like a widow. Okay. And then you got goyim. Everybody know what goyim is, right?
Yeah.
Us.
Peoples.
Yeah,
I
that's
said us.
peoples.
In the
Yeah,
people.
the Gentile.
The Gentiles,
nations,
yes.
right?
Nations, yeah.
Uh-huh. The nations or Gentiles.
Among the Gentiles.
Sarati. What's it sound like?
Nope.
Sarah. What does Sarah mean?
Princess.
Yeah, princess. Yeah,
Mhm.
remember that from the Old Testament?
Yeah.
The princess. Bam, the note.
Among the regions or provinces.
Okay.
Oh,
Same word here, has become.
has
She.
Has become. What is lamas?
Slave.
Worker?
Slave.
A slave? Lamas is slave?
Yeah, slave.
Okay. All right. Right from the very beginning, we see a lament. It's easy to remember Lamentations, right? Lament. Remember we talked about the lament psalms. Remember that?
Mhm.
We said two categories of psalms, praise and lament. So this is an acrostic poem. Where have we seen an acrostic poem before?
Psalm
Psalms.
119.
Psalm
Yes.
19.
Psalm 119. So you know your Hebrew alphabet, right?
Yeah.
But this is by far more elaborate.
Yes, yes it is. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Hey, Te,
Oh, yeah,
Yod,
look at
Vav,
that.
Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Sadi, Kof, Re, Sin, Shin, Tav. You guys can say it that fast, right?
no, not that fast. Very slowly.
Oh.
Okay. Chapters 1 and 2 have 3 lines, and in each of these you have 22 verses, and in the first line of each verse you have a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Chapter 3 has 66 lines. The first 3 lines each beginning with the first letter of the alphabet, the second 3 lines beginning with the second letter of the alphabet, Beit, and so on. Chapter 4 has 2 lines per verse. Only the first line of each verse beginning with the successive letter of the alphabet. And then chapter 5 is unique, 22 lines. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. But in this case, the alphabetic structure is not used. Very elaborate acrostic poem, as someone said, very intricate, very elaborate. Well, let's talk about why the Jews will read Lamentations on Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. Saddest day. Why? It marks the destruction of 2 temples. The first one we said, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians destroyed Solomon's temple. That's the book of Lamentations, historical context. The second, Titus led the Roman army to destroy the second temple. So if you listen to my lecture on Daniel 9, 24 to 27, Daniel predicts the destruction of the temple. The people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city, Jerusalem, and the sanctuary, the temple. So Daniel predicted it. Jesus predicted it in the Olivet Discourse, that the temple would be destroyed. And so, amazingly, on the very same day, when the Jews are mourning, fasting the destruction of the first temple, guess what? Titus and the Romans come and destroy the second temple. And so, again, we see the sovereignty of God, which is this destruction of the temple was a judgment on the Jews for the rejection of Jesus as Messiah. And the Jews today cannot practice the sacrificial system, right? Because, again, all of that, as I just taught in Hebrews, finds its fulfillment of Christ and his sacrifice on the cross. So what do they do on Tisha B'Av? Well, they fast, refrain from eating and drinking, bathing, wearing leather shoes, that's a luxury, using lotion, and engaging in marital relations, fasting. They read the book of Lamentations in the synagogue. So I guess, Chris, if we have a chance, we should go back to Beit Shalom. If we're around Tisha B'Av, I'd like to go. They read it sitting on the floor. I thought that was interesting. Or low stools. Dimly lit synagogue. They recite Kenot, special elegies or mourning poems. Again, recited to mourn the temple, tragedy in Jewish history like the Holocaust. Restrictions on comfort, no comfortable chairs, no showering or washing with warm water, no wearing leather shoes. Limited study, Torah study is prohibited, except reading sad texts like Lamentations, Job, parts of Jeremiah. Symbols of mourning, the curtain on the ark containing the Torah is removed. Light is dimmed in the synagogue, and sometimes Jews will put ashes even on their forehead. Suda Hamafesket, the meal that separates daily life and the time of fasting and mourning. So it's sort of like the last meal before the fast. Just a simple hard-boiled egg with bread dipped in ash. Thought that was interesting. Eaten before the fasting begins. No greetings, no saying shalom. And in the middle of the day, some prohibitions are eased. You can finally sit on a chair again, not on the floor. All right, so there we have the book of Lamentations. All right, the famous text. We can't leave Lamentations without looking at Lamentations 3, 22 and 23. So who has not read tonight Hebrew text?
Is my mic working? I'm not sure.
Yes, I can hear you. Kimpy, go ahead.
Okay.
Read the first
My
line.
connection is terrible, so I cannot open my camera, so please.
Okay, that's fine.
Lamentation 3:22. Esther, Yahweh, Kilo, Tamanu, Kilo, Kalu, Rahamoy, Mo.
Okay. Someone try the second line. Have not read yet.
Michael,
Okay, go ahead.
Kadashim, Love Karim, Rabah, Emnatek.
Okay, thank you. So that first word there, 322. Hesed. What is that word?
Faithful love.
Faithful love or loving
Yeah,
kindness.
faithful love or covenant love, right? It's a covenant term, right? So put yourself in the sandals of the Israelites. Their king has been killed, Zedekiah. The people are in chains and they're being marched away from their beloved city. And they look back and everything is on fire. The city's on fire. The temple is destroyed. And the Babylonians are rejoicing as they're taking back the gold plates and cups back to Babylon, back to the temple of the gods of the Babylonians. The question that would go through your mind as an Israelite, where is Yahweh, the God of the covenant? Why did he permit this to happen? That his house is on fire. The place where he promised to dwell with his people. Why would he permit the temple of God in Jerusalem to be destroyed? That's why we have the book of Lamentations.
Well,
He
they had
described-
desecrated it
Yeah, they desecrated this and
for hundreds of years.
Yeah, and he talks about what happened inside the city. Some very, very bad things happened here. You remember when we talked about Theodicy? We talked about Job. We have several books like this, like Habakkuk is dealing with that. I'll just read some things here. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, this is from the article by Homer Heater. Let's see. Yeah, make sure you read this article. I haven't had a chance to read through the whole thing, but he goes into quite a bit of detail on the Hebrew text. and talking about the acrostic poem. So I that's the reason why I wanted you to see that. I think there was something I was going to read. I can't find it for some reason. Sorry about that. Any thoughts that you had from your research on Lamentations before we move on?
Yeah, it's Kostenberger, right? Oh yeah. You're referring to this, right? Kostenberger?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
I
did
thought
did
I
you
I
have
found
anything
strange.
on Lamentations?
Yeah, he did not make any link with the destruction of the Babylons, as far as I remember. So he said it was a lament of a general destruction, general invasion, but he did not refer specifically to Nebuchadnezzar, and I think it's kind of strange.
That is strange. It's sort of beyond me. I know Kostenberger is more of New Testament guy, but yeah, I don't understand that. Anybody else see that in the book?
I think one of the things he was talking about was that the book itself didn't mention Babylon by name, like that was the historical setting. But I think maybe it was intentionally left, for lack of a better term, blank,
Okay.
so that no matter what the people of Israel faced, they could go back to that book and use it. I'm a little bit fuzzy on that one, but I think that was his position, something like that.
Okay. So he wants to keep it generic so it can be used for more than one particular event.
Yeah, he said that. Okay, the main themes of Lamentations are the problem of suffering, the severity and compassion of God, and the restoring of a broken relationship with God. And so he leaves really open.
Okay. Anybody else with thought or critique?
If I understood what he was saying right on the section in ethics, he also said that he thought that the punishment described for the Israelites in Lamentations was beyond what they deserved.
Yes, correct.
Which I was really shocked by that.
Me too. I mentioned this in
Considering
my.
how sinful they had been for decades and decades and decades. I was kind of stunned with that one.
Yeah, I mentioned this in the paper.
And I think that obviously he didn't connect it to Deuteronomy 28, the blessings and the cursings. But again, you see the consequence of idolatry over a number of years. Someone has said that that was the main reason why they went into captivity, the idolatry. And when they came back as a nation, they didn't tolerate it like they did before. They didn't have the idol temples. They didn't have the idol images within the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. So they were sort of, quote, cured of that, and really focused on being that focus on the worship of Yahweh. So looking at this translation one more time here before our break, we're talking about the loyal love, the compassion of the Lord. It says here, Tom knew, it's because of that compassion, loyal love, we are not consumed, right? his compassion, rakum, another important attribute of God, not only the loyal love, but his compassion. You see that rakum, his compassion at the end there. Lo kalu, do not fail. His compassion does not fail. Isn't it interesting? Many people, of course, died in the devastation, destruction of Jerusalem, but not all. And this is another Old Testament principle. There's always a remnant, right? There's always the remnant. Israel is not completely wiped out. Why? Because of God's loyal love and his compassion. God made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that he's going to keep. And what is that promise? I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Now, keep that in mind. Next week, if I have time, I'll share a little bit about the times of the Gentiles. And when you think about all the different Gentile nations that have come against Israel, each one of them have experienced defeat and destruction. And so those ancient nations, Babylon is no more, Assyria is no more, Babylon is no more, right, in terms of history. And Greece and Rome both have experienced their defeats as well. So it's because of God's hesed, important word, and rakum, his compassions. And then you have the word for faithfulness. What is that word?
Hesed.
No, that's the
Emunah?
first. Yeah, amunah. Yeah, amunah is the word there. It's at the end of verse 23. Your faithfulness, right? Great. Rabbah is your faithfulness. Okay. So the compassions of God don't fail, and they are new. Bakar is in the morning. So they're new in the morning. Great is your faithfulness. So God is faithful to his covenant. Maybe the people who went into captivity didn't think that. But he was faithful to his covenant, right? Go back to Deuteronomy 28. He said, if you obey, you will be blessed. And if you disobey, you're going to be cursed. And the ultimate discipline was deportation from the land. Right? They were taken out of the land, and they were away from the land for 70 years. Why? Because for 490 years, they didn't keep that commandment of the seventh year, the sabbatical year. They were farming the land, and they didn't let the land lay fallow for a year, the sabbatical year. And that's why they went into captivity for 70 years. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we are going to go to our next book. I can get this to come up.
Well, it's an adorable picture.
You like my
that's
sheet?
a great picture.
Yes.
I love that sheep. All right, so it's Colette time. 5 minutes, and we'll come back for Colette. Okay, we'll see you in 5 minutes.
All right.
All right, well, welcome back to our last hour here. We're going to look at Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes. Again, let me mention some resources to you. Don't miss Greg Parsons, who's done some excellent work. Guidelines for understanding and proclaiming the book of Ecclesiastes. He has 2 articles, part 1 and 2. Those are articles in your modules there. So our English title is Ecclesiastes. The Hebrew title is Kohelet. So let's go there if you have your Bibles. And the words of the preacher. I think I told you that I taught preaching for 19 years. And I was a pastor, and for 14 years, preaching Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Actually preached in chapel this week. So I do enjoy preaching, and I've enjoyed studying the book of Ecclesiastes. So Kohelet is the Hebrew title, Greek title, Ecclesiastes. The words of the preacher, son of David, I believe Solomon, king in Jerusalem. So some of the text there telling us that he's wise, a great builder, of course, responsible for building that temple, destroyed 586. He wrote many proverbs. We studied that connection. So the theme of the book is the Hebrew word havel. Havel means empty or meaningless. Translated in the King James, vanity. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That's havel, is the Hebrew word. NIV, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. So I put as the theme of the book, life without God is meaningless. Life without God is meaningless. Of course, life with God is meaningful. So the Hebrew word havel, meaningless, vanity, absurdity, frustration, emptiness, pointless. I'm teaching a course, I think I told you, on Thursday nights, biblical philosophy and worldview. And one of the things that when you go through a book like How Should We Then Live by Francis Schaeffer, we talk about various philosophers, their philosophies. Many of them start with man. I talked about that in James, the wisdom from below. And the wisdom from below, man's wisdom, can't figure it out. So many people have tried so many different things, and we're going to see that in the book of Ecclesiastes. Solomon tried many different things. He tried marrying many women. He tried work, collecting things. Of course, we know he was wise in his observations in nature, but yeah, his pursuits all led to a dead end. He didn't arrive at the place he wanted to arrive at. And that's true for many of these philosophers. And it's interesting to compare what Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes with contemporary philosophers and their philosophies even today. the question we ask, is Ecclesiastes a optimistic or pessimistic book? I mean, especially with the word vanity, meaningless, appearing 37 times. You see the phrase under the sun used 29 times, under the heaven used there in a few verses. He talks about striving after wind. He talks about work and labor 35 times. Is it a pessimistic book? Well, if you read it from the perspective of someone who doesn't know God, it seems to be pessimism. Life under the sun is meaningless. There's really no point. He talks about somebody who has a lot of money. When he dies, he leaves it all behind. It may go to a fool, someone who will waste everything that he's worked for. So Solomon did a lot of thinking about life. But what we're going to see throughout the book, and especially at the end, he says we need to enjoy life and we need to fear God. Look at all the references to those two things: enjoy life and fear God. Life is a gift. I just taught that again in James chapter 1, which is a sort of a New Testament wisdom book. Every good gift, every perfect gift comes from above, from the Father of lights. Every single thing that we have, books, car, cell phone, house, life, health, family, friends, you make your list. Life is a gift, and Solomon says we need to enjoy life. So is it a pessimistic book or optimistic book? Well, I guess it depends on what verses you're looking at. So I believe the purpose of the book is to show us that true significance and satisfaction in life does not come from the things of the world, but it's found in fearing God, relationship with God, obeying his commandments, and enjoying life as God's gift. Well, we don't get to see our children as much as we'd like to see them, or our grandchildren, but when we do, we have a great time. And we celebrate life. We celebrate birthdays. My son just had his 37th birthday. And so my wife and I like to look through pictures, son growing up, and we post pictures, we send pictures to each other. But, we're celebrators, Kim and I. We like to celebrate life. And we're sad that we can't be with them to celebrate, but we're able to see them over the weekend on, a FaceTime call. So the purpose of Ecclesiastes, it's all about a biblical philosophy of life. All right, so look at the chiastic structure. I think it really does fit this book. You've got that theme that's repeated about Havel, life without God being meaningless, found there in chapter 1, verse 2, also found in chapter 12, verse 8. You have two poems that bracket the search of Solomon for satisfaction in life and significance in life. That search is found in chapter 1, verse 12 to chapter 11, verse 6. So the first poem emphasizes life is cyclical, goes through pattern, repeats itself in some ways. And then he talks about enjoying life while you can before you get old. Talk about that. And finally, he finishes, let me tell you, let's sum it all up. Fear God and keep his commandments. Did Solomon learn his lesson? I think he did at the end of his life. I think he looked back, and I think he looked back with regret. And I think the book of Ecclesiastes reflects that. Well, we hear the song in Lion King, The Circle of Life, one of my favorite songs, The Circle of Life, right? Generations come and generations go. Cycles occur in nature, weather cycles, water cycles. Just seems like everything is cyclical, in a circle. The sun rises and sets. It's a new day. I think I told you I get up early in the morning. I like to see the sunrise. I get my coffee at Panera, have my devotion, and I like to see the sunrise. Go out to the car, there's the sun. It's a new day. The wind blows like it's been doing here. It's hot, it's humid, it feels like Florida in the middle of the country. The wind blows south and then it goes north. And then it blows really hard like it did last night in a storm. The rivers flow into the seas and then from them. Cycles happen in human activity. Nothing is complete, nothing is new, nothing is remembered. Well, now we have Solomon's search for satisfaction in life. Let's look and see what he did. He says, I, the preacher, was king over Israel. I set my heart, notice, to seek and search out by wisdom everything done under heaven. Now, this was his project. This was his goal. Let's search it all out. Let's figure it out. Let's figure life out. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of men by which we're exercised. Well, why do I get up in the morning? Why do I go to work? To get up the next day and do it all over again. Why do I do it? Well, he says, I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and everything is meaningless and grasping for the wind. So here we have the summary of his search. We'll see this reflected then in the details of the search described. The futility of human work, and then the inability of human understanding. Futility of human work, his exploration, conclusion, and reason here in chapter 1. We'll have time to look at each one of these verses in detail. And then the inability of human understanding. Human understanding, he says, is going to bring distress and sorrow. Pursuing pleasure, pursuing wisdom, and pursuing work. Each one, he says, meaningless. So he tried each one of these things. He went down different streets, found each one of them to be a dead end. Chapter 2, he pursued pleasure and laughter. Is life all about eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die? Tried alcohol, intoxication. He said that's meaningless. Well, let's build things. Let's build houses, vineyards, gardens, parks. Let's have fruit trees, ponds, trees, something beautiful to leave behind. Let's purchase slaves, flocks, herds. Let's amass silver and gold. I mean, he was the richest man who ever lived. Let's listen to music. So he was a very great person. He engaged in every pleasure he could think of. He had everything that a man could want at his disposal. And then he found out that pursuing pleasure is just sort of a waste. He felt empty inside. Well, let's try wisdom, he said. wisdom is better than folly. But then he said, you know, wisdom really has no ultimate advantage. Both the wise man and the fool die. And when they die, they're forgotten. The wise man and the fool. So why be wise? And that's why Solomon hated life. He was a wise man. Well, let's try work. He does not know if his work will be left to a wise man or a fool. You work hard, you make money. Are you going to leave it to somebody who just wastes what you've worked for? What do we get for all of our work? Sorrow, distress, sleepless nights. One must enjoy life because God is the one who gives us that ability. But for many people who are workaholics, work is a burden, not a blessing. Well, he says in chapter 3, God is sovereign. God has a time for everything in our lives, a time to be born and a time to die. Time to plant, time to uproot, time to kill, time to heal, time to tear down, time to build up, time to cry and time to laugh, time to mourn at a funeral, and a time to dance at a wedding. Time to throw stones and a time to pick up stones. A time to embrace and a time to shun embracing. A time to search, time to give up as lost, time to keep, time to throw away. That spring cleaning time to throw away, right? Time to tear apart and time to sew together. God has a time for everything, and there's a time to be silent and time to speak, time to love, time to hate. We're living in a time for war. That terrorist regime in Iran with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and you name them, those terrorists that have been killing people and blowing up things for years. It's a time for war. Time to put an end to that. God has a time for every single thing under heaven. Okay, let's keep moving. He's made everything beautiful in his time. I wish I had time to play that song from this movie. I'm trying to remember the name of the movie. It'll come to me after later, but there's this person who sings this song. He makes everything beautiful in his time. So if that's the case, let's enjoy life now, because life is a gift. Our work is from God, so let's enjoy our work. Only God's work is permanent, complete. Well, there's an appointed time for judgment and justice. Everybody wants justice. So God is going to judge in the future. So let's leave that to him. Solomon talked about in chapter 4, striving after achievement and advancement in life. Moving up the corporate ladder, he said there's two things here, oppression and rivalry. And he says those who died were happier than the living if they were oppressed. As far as rivalry goes, he talks about the importance of contentment. Talks about working without an heir or ruling without an heir. Two are better than one. Talks about that. And then ruling without an heir, poverty with wisdom is better than nobility with folly. And the gain of the throne, the gain of popularity, and then the loss of the throne and the loss of popularity. We see that even among our elected officials. So man's work may be lost through a rash vow, chapter 5. You make a vow, you need to keep your vow. Don't sin in making a vow and then making an excuse. Man's work may be lost to the king through oppression. Again, this would be evil or wicked rulers who extort, a king who extorts a landowner. Observations about money. Man's work may result in money, which can be lost, and money can lead to problems. He talks about money does not satisfy, can be consumed by others, it robs one of sleep, can bring trouble, is easily lost, brings gloom, distress. So if that's the case, let's just enjoy life, the money that God gives to us. So chasing after money is meaningless. But that's what many people are doing, chasing the almighty dollar. Man's work may not be enjoyed. So the importance of being content with what we have. So some of the inequities of life. Again, Solomon was very insightful. As I put here, life is not fair sometimes. No comfort for the oppressed, no reward for the diligent, no purpose for the laborer, no honor for the wise, no enjoyment for the wealthy, and no long life for the righteous. That's not fair. I think that's one of the hardest lessons, I think, for a young person. They're growing up is say, life isn't fair. You didn't get the promotion. You should have gotten it. You didn't get the raise. You should have got that. Someone was promoted before you. Someone got to be the pastor of that church that you wanted to pastor. It's not fair, not right. Well, again, God's in control. Makes things beautiful in his time. No victory to the strong. Sometimes the underdog wins. You watch March Madness basketball. See those last second shots. Well, we talked about that one issue about work. Now he's going to talk about human understanding in the next section here. So man does not know what is good for him, and man does not know the future. All right, that's his observation about human understanding. Again, when we look at philosophy, I told you I've been teaching a class, Biblical Philosophy and Worldview. When you look at all the different philosophers who try in their human philosophies to figure it out, from Plato to Aristotle to Epicurus, who said, eat, drink, and be merry. Why? Because tomorrow we die. There is no judgment, no resurrection. Death is the end, so party on. That's the philosophy of most people. But man does not know the future. If you don't know God, if you don't know the Word, and you don't know there is, as the writer of the Hebrews says, is appointed unto man once to die, and after this the judgment. Well, yes, there is accountability. And the judge of the earth will do right. What man does not know? He doesn't know what's good for him. He doesn't know about justice. He doesn't know when he will die. He doesn't know the value of wisdom, and he doesn't know the ways of God. I don't think I have time to go into all these here. So Solomon encourages man to enjoy prosperity. And he mentioned some things that we might wonder about. Mourning is better than feasting, better to go to a funeral than a wedding. Why is that? Well, you need to think about that. He says, righteousness is no sure means of protecting a person against an early death. Now, we already saw in Job, righteousness does not guarantee a life of health and wealth. He warns about overzealous righteousness and overindulgent sinfulness. So he talks about extremes. So what was Solomon doing? Not only recording his own journey, his spiritual journey, talking about things that he tried, and he's looking at other people. And that's a good lesson for us, right? And that's what we learn about this wisdom literature, courses of action that are wise versus those that are unwise. And we can learn from others. So we can learn from each other. Man does not know what is best. Solomon found out that righteousness is rare. Man does not know about justice. He exhorts the reader to obey the king, exhorts the reader to not break allegiance to the king. Wickedness will be judged by the king. But then he said, the wicked are not punished in this life. So what's the solution to that? Enjoy life. Man cannot discover what God is going to do. So why does the wicked get away with their evil actions? Answer, they don't. They may get away with it in this life, but not in the next. So they ultimately don't get away with their wickedness. They don't get away with evil. All people die eventually. So while alive, there's evil, hope, knowledge, death is coming. When dead, they don't know anything. Talks about the dead people. They have no reward. They're forgotten. So enjoy life. Life is a gift. Enjoy your food. Enjoy your clothes. Enjoy your wife. Enjoy your work. Death happens quickly and you don't know when it's going to come. Man doesn't know the value of wisdom. It's better than military strength, and it can be ruined by a ruler's folly. The foolish ruler. It's sad when someone that is supposed to be the leader of the country says or does things that are very offensive to Christians. You know what I'm talking about. The foolish ruler. Man does not know the value of wisdom. You can dig a pit and fall into it. I hope that doesn't happen to you. You could break through a wall and be bitten by a snake. You could be quarrying stones and then you could be hurt by one of those stones. You could be splitting logs and then you hurt yourself. Misfortune can be prevented by preparation. Sharpen that axe, but watch out for the snake. And our wisdom can be ruined by foolish words. I talked about that today, and in James it says that teachers will be judged with a stricter standard. So I told my students, I said, you know, I spend time on my lectures and my presentations. Why? Because I do believe that. I want to practice what I preach. Don't curse the king. All right, so we come to the end of Ecclesiastes because we got Esther still to cover. I love the movie Up. If you've never seen it, the cartoon movie, you should see it sometime. But can't even remember the guy's name. Somebody might know. So Ecclesiastes chapter 11. A man lives many years and rejoices in them all. Chapter 11, verse 8. And yet let him remember the days of darkness, for there'll be many. All that coming is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth. Let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart, sight of your eyes. You know that God will bring you into judgment for all these things. Talk about that again in chapter 12, verse 1. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Enjoy life while you can. Why? Because getting old is hard. Just ask somebody who's older than you. So some instructions for young people. Enjoy life now. Rejoice in your youth. Enjoy your activities, but realize God will judge you. So that should keep you from doing something that's wrong. It's hard to get old. You have less strength, less enjoyment in life, struggle with sight, depression. Your body begins to slow down and break down. As he mentions here, the keepers of the house tremble. Think about somebody who has Parkinson's, their arms and hands are trembling. The strong men bow down, their legs grow bent and feeble. The grinders, the teeth cease. Why? Because they're few, loss of teeth. You look through the windows and things are growing dim. Eyesight begins to go. The doors are shut. The sound of grinding is low. Loss of hearing. You rise up at the sound of a bird. Can't sleep through the night. All the daughters of music are brought low. Hearing impairment. Need hearing aids. Afraid of height. Tears in the way. Fearful of going out of the house. The almond tree blossoms. The hair turns gray and white. The grasshopper is a burden. No longer jumping around. Life is slowing down. Desire fails. Decline of physical strength. Loss of sexual desire. Loss of appetite. So remember your Creator before the end of life. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, the golden bowl broken, the pitcher shattered, the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth. The spirit will return to God who gave it. All right, so some descriptions of death here, metaphors. And we're back to the theme, meaningless. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. Life without God is meaningless. Now, if you just had what we looked at, you could easily say this is a pessimistic book. But remember all those verses I talked about enjoying life? Now, this is where being a preacher really fits in. Those who like to preach. Chapter 12, verse 9. The preacher was wise, and he taught the people knowledge. He pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. So one of the assignments I gave my students in advanced expository preaching, they had to come up with a calendar of what they would preach in a year. 52 sermons, 52 sermon outlines. They looked at me like, are you kidding me? I said, you need to think through sermon series. You need to think, am I going to preach through a book? Am I going to have a topical sermon? What am I going to preach on at Christmas? I want you to think through all those things. I mean, that's what we see Solomon. He says he was wise. He taught the people. He pondered. He thought about life, and he put it all in order in many proverbs. He wrote down his thoughts, his ideas. The preachers sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. That's why I had all my students write out their sermons. And that's why I wrote out my sermons all the years I was a pastor. That's why I write out my lectures as a professor. Why? I put my thoughts in words and I put them down on paper. It forces me to think about the text and about communication. And I think that we have too many pastors and preachers today who just get up there and say, oh, the Spirit will lead me and guide me, but they haven't really thought through what they're going to say. And no wonder people are starving for a word of truth from God. The words of the wise are like goads. The words of scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. The words of the wise are like goads. You know, goad is a sharp stick. As I used to tell my students, your sermon should have some bite to it. It should poke and prod people to go forward for God. That's what a goad does, right? To get the cattle to move. And well-driven nails, points that you drive home with illustrations, applications, well-driven nails given by one shepherd. Many books, there is no end. Well, just look around in my library. Someone said, have you read all those books? I said, no. You just have to understand I like to collect books, and I'll read some, put it back on the shelf for another day. Writing books, reading books, studying books. That's the life of a PhD prof and a PhD student. Making books, there is no end. I love books, so that makes me smile. Someone said, bury me in my library, bury me in my books. Okay, that's fine. I like them. Much study is wearisome to the flesh. And it's that time of year. I call it crunch time. It's crunch time for everybody, not just for students, but professors as well. It's crunch time. It's that time when I can't wait till summer break. Well, you're not there yet. Nope. No rest for the weary. Keep going. Keep studying. Keep reading. Keep writing. So what's it all about? Fear God and keep his commandments. This is man's all. God's going to bring everything into judgment, every secret things, whether good or evil. Fear God, keep his commandments. Enjoy life while you can. Questions, comments on Ecclesiastes. I got 15 minutes for Esther, but I'm going to get it done. But your questions or comments on Ecclesiastes, maybe something that you wrote down in your paper.
I wanted to say that as Solomon says, life is meaningless under the sun, but life is meaningful in the sun, S-O-N.
Yes, I love that. That'll preach, as they say. Life in the sun, S-O-N, instead of life under the sun. Okay, let's move on to Esther, the queen. I love this verse. I picked it out as sort of a key verse. Esther was told this: if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows? But you've come to the royal position. You've come to the palace for such a time as this. Whatever position you have in life, whatever ministry job you have, you are in that position because God wants you to be there at this time in world history. I think about that a lot. What a privilege it is for us to be reading and studying the Word of God, to be preaching and teaching the Word of God in these days, which may be the last days of the church. That God would give us the privilege to say to a world, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved, to preach the gospel, to teach the Word of God. God has given us these opportunities, these open doors for such a time as this. The church needs you. The church needs you to be faithful and to study hard and to preach and teach the Word of God and to pass the baton of faith to the next generation. Time is short. I get up every morning, very early in the morning, and that's the first thought that comes to my mind. Time is short. We're running out of time. Christ could come today. What difference should that make in the way I live my life? To make an impact for Christ in what I say and what I do. I dedicate my life to serve him every moment. I want to hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. For such a time as this, you are there, I am here. Be faithful. I just got done teaching 2 Timothy. Be faithful to the finish. Paul says, I've run the race. I've finished the work. There's laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord will give to me in that day, and not to me only, but to those who love his appearing. May we live every day in light of his soon coming. So when I read this about what's happening, and of course you know the story of Haman or Haman and the genocide plan. The events of Esther fall into the book of Ezra between chapter 6 and 7. You should know that. And approximately a 10-year period of time, 483 to 473 BC, in terms of the Old Testament calendar. And of course, the king is Ahasuerus, Hebrew name, a Persian named Xerxes the First. So some key dates and events: 483, Ahasuerus planning session in Susa, which is in modern day Iran. The queen Vashti is deposed. Why? Because she doesn't come to present herself at a party. Ahasuerus goes to fight the Greeks. You have those wars between the Greeks and the Persians. Eventually, Alexander the Great will lead the Greeks to defeat the Persians. And then you have the famous Persia beauty pageant there in Susa, and Esther is selected to be the next queen. So he returns to Susa. Esther is made the queen. And then we have Haman and his decree. Haman was the one who influenced Ahasuerus to sign this decree to destroy the Jews. And then we have the whole story, which leads to Haman dying on the gallows he prepared for Mordecai. We call that talionic justice. So the important people: Ahasuerus, or king of Persia; Vashti, the queen of Persia, refused to come display her beauty at a party; Memucan, the prince who told Ahasuerus to remove Vashti as queen. He says, if you don't, then all the men in Persia will have wives who refuse to do what they say. Esther, the Persian name; Hadassah, the Hebrew name for the Jewish queen of Persia. Mordecai, the adoptive uncle of Esther, helped deliver the Jews. Haggai, the man in charge of the harem of Ahasuerus. Haman, the wicked Persian, who was hung on the gallows he prepared for Mordecai. Zeresh, the wife of Haman, suggested that he build a gallows for Mordecai. And then Harbona, the servant, who suggested to Ahasuerus that Haman be hanged on the gallows he prepared for Mordecai. Those are the key people. And so the outline of the book: the feast of Ahasuerus, and then the feast of Esther. Remember, she had two feasts, and she revealed at the second feast that Haman was the one who was trying to murder the Jews. And then we have the feast of Purim. Haman cast lots. We learn from Proverbs that the casting of the lot is in the hands of the Lord. He decided that the 13th of Adar was the date for the extermination of the Jews. Now, I mentioned before, anti-Semitism is seen here in the book. And in some ways, and we'll talk about this when we get to Daniel next week, we have a type of the Antichrist. Haman wants to kill all the Jews. He dies on his gallows. Hitler, right, in the Holocaust, killed 6 million Jews. 6 million Jews. And we started tonight talking about Hashoah, right? The Antichrist will give the order, kill all the Jews, in the middle of the tribulation period. The last Gentile world ruler will be anti-Semitic. And so we see a rise of anti-Semitism. We already seen how God destroyed each one of those individuals. And we just recently saw another one, Khomeini, go down. Think of all the people he killed. He was a mass murderer. Stalin, Mao, mass murderers. Lenin, all of these individuals were mass murderers, hated the Jews, anti-Semitism. Interesting, Purim relates to the word for pure, which is lot. It's the plural, right? Im ending. Lots. It's the Feast of Lots. And they celebrate on the 14th. That was the day after their victory over their enemies. Well, I mentioned that Chris and I got to go, and we talked a little bit about that. So I found it interesting, 3 Hebrew blessings on the Feast of Purim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us with his commandments, with the Torah, and commanded us regarding the reading of the Megillah. And that happens on the Feast of Purim. We got to go to the synagogue. They read the Megillah, which is the book of Esther, scroll of Esther. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who performed miracles for our fathers in those days at this time. When you look at all the things that, I mean, from a human perspective, people say, oh, the Jews got lucky. No, they did not. There is no luck in a world controlled by a sovereign God. There is no luck. I mean, the fact that the king couldn't sleep that one night, he got up and said, I'll just read from the court records. And he just happened to read about Mordecai, who informed the guards that there was a plot on his life. That wasn't luck. That was God's providence. That was God's sovereignty. And it led to a series of events with Haman actually escorting Mordecai down through the streets of Susa. This is how God honors, how the king honors the person in Persia. How ironic. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who kept us alive and sustained us and brought us to this season. Every Jew today on Hashoah who got out of their car, bowed their head for a few minutes, heard the sirens going throughout Israel, thought about that. God has delivered them. All these different missiles sent by Iran. We've looked at the maps. We've heard the stories of the Israelis going into the shelters. They've experienced it. I was reading the one story, the person was saying, it's so hard to live between war and peace in the gray area. You know, is it going to be peace? No. They say it's peace, but then they fire another missile. He says, so hard to live like that. Well, the 3 blessings are recited in the synagogue. The scroll of Esther is read. Everyone shouts, boo, hiss when Haman is mentioned. Everyone cheers. Mordecai is mentioned. The groggers are used, the noisemakers. We got to see it, Chris and I. A special play for the children. Got to see that. Costume party. Girls dress up like Queen Esther. The boys like King Ahasuerus. The Hamantash. These cookies that look like tricorn hat. The giving of gifts, including candy. They call that Zedekah, righteousness. We talked about that today in James chapter 2. Show your faith by your good works. That's righteousness, Zedekiah. You know, James was known as James the Just or James the Righteous. Did you know that? And if you read Eusebius, the church historian, he said that James would go into the temple and he would kneel down so much his knees were as hard as a camel's. Wow. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man accomplishes much. That's what James wrote. Be a doer of the word, not just a hearer. Put it into practice. Well, the festive pure meal. Did Jesus celebrate Purim? Well, we know he celebrated Hanukkah. It's interesting. At Hanukkah, guess what he said? I'm the light of the world. Amazing. Some think the unnamed feast there in John 5:9 was Purim itself. It's not named. We'll go back to Genesis 12:3 to finish tonight. Is God a covenant-keeping God? He said, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you. And all in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Yes, he is a covenant-keeping God. And we've seen that tonight as we've looked at the Megilloth. Song of Songs. I mean, the Jews read that at Passover. Why? Because they believe in God's hesed, his love, his loyal love for Israel. They see an allegory there. Each one of those books. Ruth, her commitment to Yahweh. To Naomi was because she made a decision to follow Yahweh, to turn away from idolatry, which, interesting, that was the problem for Israel in the book of Judges. What an example. And then as we look at Lamentations, yes, God is faithful to his covenant. He said, if you obey, I will bless you. If you disobey, I will curse you. And the ultimate curse was deportation from the land. That was the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. So, yes, God's covenant, loyal love, his mercies are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. God is faithful to his covenant. And then we've looked at Ecclesiastes and how Solomon had to learn through experience, his search for meaning and satisfaction, that it really does come down to fearing God, trusting God, and keeping his commandments. Trust and obey. There's no other way, right? To be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Finally, the book of Esther. We've come full circle as we started tonight talking about Shoah, and we again see that those who curse Israel will be cursed. All right, so next week we move on to Daniel. We're going to have your lectures. Just a reminder for next week, we've got Paul Bohr doing Job 1. We've got Kimpy doing Psalm 32. We've got Kelso doing Psalm 110. And we've got Chris Connor doing Psalm 37, 1 through 8. So you guys will be on for next time. And then we will take the last hour to talk about the book of Daniel. All right. I'm going to ask, let's see, I'm going to ask Ron York to close us in prayer tonight.
All right, let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for the wonderful blessing we have, as Dr. Gromacki has said, of looking into your word and having the opportunity to study it. And we thank you and praise you that through service to you and obedience, we can have purpose and meaning in our lives and have an impact and blessing on others in our families and with those outside our families and our fellow believers in Christ. I pray that you would continue to work in our hearts and our minds as we seek to study your word, that we might apply it and teach it to those that you bring in our paths. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Well, thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you have a great week of study.
Thank you.
We are, let me turn this off first. We are, as you know, finished with 5 weeks. Okay, so this is week 5. And next week, we do Daniel, and then the last week 7 is finishing up with Ezra and Nehemiah and Chronicles. So that is the Ketuvim course. Let me remind you, encourage you